Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few truly know how you are. When Machiavelli wrote these words in 1513, he revealed one of power's greatest secrets. Perception often outweighs reliability. He warned us of a dangerous paradox, that moral ethics can become deadly obstacles in the struggle for power. But why does human psychology make us vulnerable to this trick? We'll explore how incompetence so often ascends to authority, and more importantly, how you can learn to spot it when it happens around you. George Armstrong Custer rose to become the youngest general in the U.S. Army, not because of battlefield brilliance, but because he knew how to play the perception game. His flamboyant uniforms and aggressive public persona masked a career littered with tactical errors, culminating in the disastrous Battle of Little Bighorn. This pattern repeats throughout history. Individuals who project certainty often get promoted over those with deeper expertise but less visible swagger. A 2020 University of London study tracked 72 mock promotion committees, evaluating leadership potential. Candidates who spoke first and most confidently received leadership endorsements 62% more often than those who demonstrated actual competence through measured responses. The researchers found people confuse vocal certainty with decision-making ability, even when objective performance metrics prove otherwise. Our brains shortcut the difficult work of evaluating real capability by substituting visible confidence as a proxy for skill. This misjudgment stems from the Dunning-Kruger effect, the psychological phenomenon where those with limited knowledge overestimate their abilities, while experts underestimate theirs. The less someone knows about a subject, the simpler it appears, creating unearned confidence. Meanwhile, true specialists understand the complexity and express appropriate doubt. In organizational settings, this creates perverse incentives where appearing decisive beats being right. A software developer who says, "I'll have that ready tomorrow," gets promoted over the one who admits this will take 3 weeks due to dependencies. Corporate boardrooms mirror this dynamic. Research by McGill University shows that of Fortune 500 CEOs fired for poor performance, 73% had previously been praised for decisive leadership, prior to their failures becoming undeniable. The exact traits that propel people up hierarchies. Projecting certainty, speaking in simple absolutes, radiating conviction. They contradict what actually makes good leadership: nuanced thinking, intellectual humility, and adaptability. Military historian Edward Luttwak notes most successful generals share one surprising trait. They move slowly and admit uncertainties during planning. Yet the officers who advance fastest consistently display the opposite characteristics. We've built systems that mistake performance for potential, presentation for substance. The modern workplace becomes an arena where actual ability gets overshadowed by those who simply play the part better. When reward structures incentivize convincing facades over real competence, you eventually get leaders who excel at only one thing: maintaining the illusion of leadership. The most intelligent leaders often make the worst politicians. A 2017 study found that beyond an IQ of 120, every additional point of intelligence actually decreases leadership effectiveness. The reason lies in how humans process complexity during times of uncertainty. When facing complicated problems, people don't want a leader who explains trade-offs and probabilities. They want someone who declares, "This is the solution," with absolute certainty. Yale researchers demonstrated this through cognitive closure experiments, showing how people use intelligence to justify existing beliefs rather than find truth. Participants who scored highest on math tests were actually worse at interpreting political data correctly. When it contradicted their views, their mental horsepower wasn't used for objective analysis, but for defending predetermined conclusions. This explains why nuanced experts struggle against charismatic simplifiers in power struggles. The human brain prefers confidence over correctness when stressed. During the 2008 financial crisis, economists providing multifaceted explanations got ignored, while pundits blaming single causes gained influence. The same pattern appears in political revolutions, where complex systemic issues get reduced to us versus them narratives. Neuroscience shows that fear triggers our craving for definitive answers by activating the amygdala's threat response. Faced with uncertainty, we'll accept any clear answer over remaining in ambiguity, even when the simple answer is wrong. This creates a paradox where morality becomes a leadership liability. Ethical leaders present dilemmas with no perfect solutions, while unethical ones promise painless resolutions. Machiavelli observed this 5 centuries ago, contrasting the fates of philosopher Cicero, who discussed governance complexities, and Julius Caesar, who declared absolute solutions. Modern studies confirm that during crises, groups consistently choose decisive leaders over thoughtful ones, even when the decisive choice leads to worse outcomes. The most dangerous moment comes when societies face multiple simultaneous crises. Research on disaster response shows that the more complex the emergency, the more people flock to leaders offering reductive solutions. Post 9/11 America saw approval ratings spike for simple aggressive policies, while nuanced approaches got labeled as weak. Organizational behavior follows similar patterns. CEOs who announce sweeping layoffs often see short-term stock bumps despite long-term damage, because the market rewards visible action over careful strategy. Simple messages spread faster than complex truths in our distracted information ecosystem. An MIT study found falsehoods travel 6 times faster online because they're crafted to bypass critical thinking with emotional triggers. Meanwhile, leaders who acknowledge uncertainty appear weak next to those making bold claims, regardless of reality. The psychological toll of complexity explains why competent people often get forced out of leadership. They refuse to provide the comfortable illusions people desperately want. This systemic bias towards simplicity creates openings for unethical actors. Once people accept that acknowledging complexity is a weakness, the race to oversimplify begins, and those willing to ignore nuance gain structural advantages. The Yale experiments revealed something darker. When people feel threatened, they'll actively punish those who point out complications, seeing them as obstacles to swift resolution. Intelligence becomes not just unnecessary for leadership, but actively dangerous to maintaining it. Cicero died defending the Roman Republic's principles, while Julius Caesar dismantled them, and history remembers who won. Machiavelli observed this pattern centuries later. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. The ethical leader faces a dilemma. Every moral restraint they honor becomes a weakness others exploit. Studies in organizational behavior revealed uncomfortable truths. Research from the University of Amsterdam tracked 245 corporate managers over a decade. Those scoring higher in psychopathic traits, charm, fearlessness, lack of empathy, achieved promotions 28% faster than their peers. These traits help in negotiations, crisis decision-making, and office politics, precisely because they eliminate hesitation. The manager who fires employees without guilt takes credit ruthlessly, or makes risky bets and gains short-term advantages. Over time, this creates systems where only the ethically flexible advance. Russia's oligarchs demonstrate how connections overpower competence. After the Soviet collapse, insiders seized industries not through skill, but through exploiting informal networks and regulatory gaps. Researchers at the Higher School of Economics found these elites maintain power through commitment mechanisms, mutually damaging secrets that bind groups together. When everyone has crossed lines, no one can afford to expose others. It creates perverse stability among unethical actors. Weak leaders accelerate this decay by selecting worse subordinates. A Cambridge study of failed governments found leaders below the 30th percentile in competence actively avoid hiring anyone in the top 50th. Competent deputies expose their shortcomings, Instead, they surround themselves with loyalists who won't question bad decisions. Like Emperor Commodus replacing generals with gladiators. The Harvard Business Review calls this the incompetence cascade, where each layer of leadership becomes less capable than the last. Game theory shows why ethics collapse under pressure. Imagine two competing executives. If one starts bribing officials, the other must either match the tactic or lose contracts. The Nash equilibrium, where no player benefits by changing strategy, becomes mutual corruption. Economists call this a race to the bottom, where defectors gain until ethics disappear. You see this in industries like finance, where after the 2008 crisis, 73% of bankers admitted they'd witnessed misconduct, but only 12% reported it. Speaking up risked isolation. Staying silent brought promotions. Yet the darkest advantage isn't just crossing lines. It's convincing others those lines don't exist. Effective unethical leaders reframe their actions as necessary pragmatism. Caesar didn't call himself a dictator. He took emergency powers to save the republic. Modern counterparts justify layoffs as tough love or data manipulation as narrative shaping. When followers accept the reframe, the leader's power becomes self-reinforcing. This creates systems where the rules technically apply to everyone, but only some face consequences. The oligarch who violates regulations pays a fine. The small business owner goes to jail. The executive who misses earnings gets a bonus. The cashier gets fired for a till discrepancy. The pattern teaches observers a brutal lesson. Ethics are constraints for the powerless, not the powerful. Over time, participants stop asking, "Is this right?" and start asking, "Can I get away with it?" The damage isn't just to individuals, it's structural. Economists studying corruption equilibrium note that once enough players adopt unethical tactics, reversing the trend becomes mathematically improbable without external intervention. That's why systems matter more than personalities in preventing this decay. If this message is resonating with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more insights like this. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't caused by sudden greed. It was the result of a system that rewarded recklessness. Mortgage brokers earned bonuses for risky loans. Rating agencies profited from inflating scores, and executives walked away rich before the crash. These weren't isolated mistakes, but structural flaws that incentivized dangerous behavior. Brazil's Centrum system illustrates how political patronage breeds incompetence. Unqualified allies are appointed to key government roles, not for their skills, but for their loyalty. This leads to worse public services and higher corruption, as shown by a 2021 study. The system filters out competence by design. Accountability also plays a crucial role. In medicine, errors have immediate consequences. But in business, failing CEOs often exit with golden parachutes. Long feedback loops delay consequences, making it easier for incompetence to hide behind image and charisma. Information asymmetry makes things worse. When people can't assess real performance, as with Bernie Madoff, they rely on signals like confidence and credentials, allowing fraud to flourish. But change is possible. The aviation industry reduced crashes by building systems that prioritize learning over blame. That's the real fix. Systems that reward honesty, enforce transparency, and align incentives with long-term outcomes. Leadership failure isn't just about people, it's about the rules they play by. The first defense against bad leadership begins with intellectual humility, acknowledging what you don't know. This mindset makes you harder to manipulate and more open to questioning leaders' claims and your own assumptions. Instead of blindly accepting easy answers to complex problems like inflation or healthcare, intellectually humble individuals ask, "What's being left out?" Media literacy strengthens this resistance. It's more than spotting fake news. It's about understanding how information is framed. Effective leaders acknowledge uncertainty and opposing views, while poor ones rely on emotional appeals and oversimplifications. For example, in the Boeing 737 MAX case, executive spin drowned out engineers' technical warnings with deadly results. Functional systems depend on accountability. Organizations that punish dissent and silence critics create conditions for failure. In contrast, structures like independent reviews, transparency laws, and anonymous feedback expose flaws early, making incompetence harder to hide. Cognitive diversity also matters. Homogeneous groups often echo poor decisions. Diverse teams, on the other hand, challenge groupthink and outperform even experts. Encouraging dissent protects against decay. Finally, education is society's immune system. Teaching people to evaluate power and arguments critically makes them resistant to manipulation. Leadership isn't magic. It's a system shaped by participation, scrutiny, and accountability. Change begins when we stop obeying blindly. Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't about power, it was about responsibility. Authority matters only when exercised wisely. Look around at your workplace, your community, the leaders you follow. Are they earning their influence or just exploiting it? Systems shape behavior more than personalities ever could. The question isn't whether people will abuse power, but whether we've built structures that make abuse difficult. Change starts when ordinary people demand transparency over secrecy, accountability over loyalty, substance over spectacle. The most powerful resistance is refusing to play by broken rules while creating better ones. One final question remains. When given the choice yourself, will you reach for power or cultivate wisdom? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments section.